By now, I'm sure you've seen a picture of Kristaps Porzingis in a Dallas Mavericks uniform. I'm sure many of you have seen that introductory press conference yesterday where Porzingis, Courtney Lee, Tim Hardaway Jr., and Trey Burke were introduced as members of the Dallas Mavericks. The part that stood out to me, and I'm sure to most Knicks fans the most, was when Mark Berman, the beat reporter for the New York Post, Knicks beat reporter, asked a couple of questions, and on both occasions got non-responses and had Mark Cuban, the owner of the Mavericks, interject and just essentially make a mockery out of him. So, I mean, I kind of felt bad for the guy. You fly all the way from New York to Dallas, obviously, to cover this Porzingis presser, and I say Porzingis even though the other three ex-Knicks were there. It was the Porzingis press conference. And really, it was to get non-responses and to be mocked by the owner of the Dallas Mavericks and by the guy that most associate with the Shark Tank. The first question he asked was essentially whether Porzingis asked for a trade. Now, again, you go back to last week and all the fireworks that took place, which eventually led to Porzingis going to Dallas. That day, the day of the trade, it was reported that Kristaps Porzingis' representation went into the Knicks front office, had that conversation, apparently expressed interest to be moved, and, that's the story. Now, whether or not you want to believe that the Knicks planted that out there, put that out there in the media so that Porzingis on the way out would be tainted in a way that he wanted out of New York, I mean, that's something we will never know. But when you think back to yesterday, that press conference, the two questions that Berman asked, one was about the trade, the other was about the plan, right? The plan that he had with the Knicks this year, and I guess ultimately what he will have with Dallas as far as whether he will play this year, if so, how much. Now, both times, again, he kind of got swatted away by Mark Cuban. So, you weren't expecting to get a real answer, and you didn't get a real answer. But, this is all in a continuing line of back and forth barbs, be they direct, be they subtle, between the Knicks and Kristaps Porzingis. I mean, this goes back to the day that he was traded. And I don't know if it was moments after, minutes after, maybe an hour after the trade went down. What's the first thing that Kristaps Porzingis posted on his social media? It was a little image or video, whatever, of him shaking hands with Luka Doncic upon the conclusion of that Knicks Mavericks game that took place the night before the trade. That's the first thing he posted. So if that isn't a virtual middle finger to the Knicks and to whatever you want to say, Knicks fan base, Knicks Nation, whatever, I mean, that was that. I mean, you look at Trey Burke's social media, you look at Courtney Lee's social media, you look at Tim Hardaway Jr.'s social media, the first thing they put up was one of those standard, thank you, New York, for everything. Now looking forward to my next chapter as a Dallas Maverick. That's what every player posts. I mean, you usually don't get what Porzingis did, and that is, moments after he's traded, he posts essentially a jab at the Knicks, basically saying, all right, now I get to go play with my buddy Luka. Sure enough, later in the evening, he posted a whole, thought out, thank you, New York, yada, 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 now off to the Mavericks. But I mean, you think about the back and forth that has gone on. And, again, with the Knicks, if you want to believe that they're putting it out there strategically, that Porzingis wanted out. His representation wanted him out. Porzingis' his brother, Giannis, he was the main orchestrator in these trade demands, or he was the main orchestrator in everything bad that Kristaps Porzingis did during his time as a Knick. And then you fast forward to yesterday, again, the day of the introductory press conference. And yesterday he posted that picture on his Instagram story. Let me see if I can pull it up here, where he said something to the effect of that the Knicks fans are going to know the truth, stay woke. Yeah, I mean, where do I even begin with that? Look, and during the press conference, by the way, he did say that he would later address I guess, everything with the Knicks in detail at some point in the future. So, I mean, let me get this straight. You've seen this before, right? Players get traded, players get shipped, players sign elsewhere, and it's not always under the best circumstances with, their previous team. This has happened before. There have been tarnished relationships in sports franchises between, the team and their star player, and trades happen. Free agency happens. Player movement happens. Now, again, you look at what the Knicks did, other than the belief that they're planting, or leaking whatever ideas, stories to reporters, and that's what they're putting out there to paint the narrative that this is all on Porzingis, this is all on his representation. The first game after the trade, when the Knicks played Memphis over the weekend, there was a graphic on MSG. Now, again, keep in mind, MSG Network is Madison Square Garden's TV network. That is their owned TV network. I mean, it's essentially what the Yes Network is to the New York Yankees. It is what SNY is to the New York Mets. So they posted a graphic about Porzingis, and it showed him, in a Dallas Mavericks uniform, and essentially some bullet points about his career. And the funniest part of that was a picture, or rather a line, that said, missed his exit meeting. So again, when you think of all the things that Porzingis accomplished in his very brief tenure as a New York Knick, that's the one thing that you slide in there. Why? Because people are going to see that, and that's going to subconsciously re-enter their mind, and they're going to think to themselves, hey, you know what? Maybe the Knicks are better off without this guy. We didn't need this headache. We didn't need this drama. Now, you think back to when Porzingis did skip that exit meeting. This was the end of the season 2 years ago. And you remember there were many Knicks fans that were in Porzingis' corner when that happened. They were applauding him. They were like, good for you, standing up to Phil Jackson and Jeff Hornacek, because, what they've put together here with the Knicks, it's not going to work, and Phil Jackson doesn't know what he's doing. He's an absentee general manager, never really was interested in this position anyway, and now that he's here, he's doing a horrible job putting this team together, so good for you making a statement. That was the sentiment. That was almost the universal sentiment. Now, there were a few dissenting voices that were like, well, Porzingis hasn't really accomplished much. It's not really his place to make that kind of a stand. But that was generally the sense that Knicks fans, in large, were supported Porzingis and what he did. But then, the little things start to happen. He's, rehabbing from his injury, and he decides not to rehab with the Knicks under the supervision of the team doctors. Instead, he decides he wants to go to Europe. He wants to rehab in Spain. He wants to do some rehab in his native Latvia. And that's the kind of thing that now fans start to wonder a little bit, right? Now the ears start to perk up, like, okay, this might not be the best look, right? When you're supposed to be the franchise cornerstone player and you're not rehabbing with the team doctors, you're kind of calling the shots from another continent. The Knicks hire a new coach in David Fizdale, and he's having to go to Latvia to do what? To basically establish a relationship with his player. Now, granted, that's not, something that's not breaking any new ground. I mean, coaches have gone above and beyond, especially in the NBA, when, one player can make or break your fortunes as head coach of the team. I mean, look at what's happening in Los Angeles right now. If you think Luke Walton is long for that job, think again. Because LeBron comes in, LeBron figures if he wants to keep that coach, and if he doesn't want to keep that coach, guess what? That coach is not long for the job. And then you look at David Fizdale and the history he had in his previous stint as head coach with the Memphis Grizzlies, and obviously he had a falling out with Marc Gasol. And the widespread belief is that falling out cost him his job. So of course, one of the first things he's going to do, David Fizdale, is to show everyone, hey, look, I learned my lesson the first time around. Look at me. I'm going all the way to Latvia to establish this rapport with our star player, even though he really hasn't done that much in the NBA, but projects to be an amazing player, so I have to do what I have to do. I mean, look at the optics of that. I mean, you're Kristaps Porzingis. You could have, I don't know, met him halfway. Maybe you come to New York. You guys decide, all right, you know what? We're going to have dinner or we're going to walk around Manhattan or whatever. We're going to catch up. No, no, no. You make David Fizdale go all the way out to Latvia to do what? To stroke your ego. I mean, that's essentially what it's all about, right? That, hey, I am a star. I'm an NBA star. NBA stars get certain things, and I want one of those certain things, and that is to make my coach fly halfway across the world to come see me, to wine and dine me, to impress me. So, I mean, again, once these things start to, accumulate, the fan base starts to scratch their heads a little bit, like, this might not be the best, it might not be the best look, but you know what? Whatever. We're all good. Fizdale's all good with Porzingis. Porzingis is all good. He gave the thumbs up to Fizdale, so we're ready to go, right? So, the tank is on. Porzingis is going to rehab. Fizdale and the Fizz kids are going to see what they have in some of these young players, and we're going to navigate the season, hopefully finish in the bottom 3, hopefully get a good draft pick. Porzingis is going to come back healthy next year. We're hopefully going to have, room for one max free agent, yada, yada, yada. That's the narrative, right? But then, obviously, this trade happens. Porzingis posts that, video of him and Luka Doncic. On his Instagram story, post a cryptic message saying, "The truth will come out," smiley face. And then the day of the press conference in the morning, "The city deserves better than that. My suggestions for Knicks fans is to stay woke. Peace." And then in the press conference, again, reiterating the fact that he is going to address this much later on, his relationship with the Knicks. Usually when this kind of thing happens and a player goes somewhere else, is getting a new start, in general, what have you always heard them say? Whatever happened over there is staying over there. I'm not going to talk about whatever went over there. We're going to start fresh. Now, Porzingis started to say that, but then again, threw in that line that I'm going to talk about it later on. Why? Why do you need to? Why? You're now a Dallas Maverick. Establish your legacy now as the next Dirk Nowitzki with the Dallas Mavericks. Or do what you have to do to boost your value and then eventually command whatever you want to command in free agency, which is coming up shortly for Porzingis. But as far as the Knicks are concerned, I mean, again, nobody's an angel here. When things get out to beat reporters, when you have so many beat reporters in synchronization reporting the exact same thing, that tells you something. That tells you that these messages are coming from a central source. But I wanted to get to one thing real quick before we wrap. Mark Stein, who's an excellent beat reporter for the New York Times, just one of those beat reporters that you could tell just does his homework, right? I will say this, the Knicks beat reporters as a whole, for the most part, some of the most educated, well-researched, and just intuitive, right? But Stein brings an angle of intelligence that I think even the most savvy fans walks away impressed with. So he did this entire passage on the Times. I'm actually going to link the article in the description below. And basically he titled it, quote, "The truth will come out." And he talks about, whether or not this was a good trade for the Knicks and, how this all built up. How is it that, the Knicks got the best deal out of this? How did the trade come together so fast? And did Porzingis really ask for a trade? And, I guess the obvious question, why didn't the Knicks shop the Dallas deal for a better deal? So he goes into some very interesting things. So it turns out that, again, as we all suspected, the deal wasn't in a vacuum. It didn't take place in a 2-hour window. The Knicks they've been having conversations for weeks now. And he mentioned specifically engaging the Utah Jazz for Donovan Mitchell. He even asked for De'Aaron Fox. I'm going to go to the part where he asks if Porzingis really did ask for a trade in the meeting. And during the press conference, he said, "I would rather just focus on what's ahead of me than looking back." So Giannis Porzingis, his older brother, who by many accounts, is his agent, his advisor, and for lack of a better phrase, is the one calling the shots when it comes to Kristaps Porzingis. apparently Giannis Porzingis, had provided the Knicks with a list of 4 teams that he deemed as, quote, acceptable trade destinations. And it was the Nets, it was the Clippers, and then there were 2 other teams that I guess are not mentioned. So clearly, yes, there was obviously a discussion that took place between the Knicks and Porzingis' representation. Now, who initiated the whole, do you want to be traded or I want out of here conversation? That is, I guess, not really divulged in this article, or that's yet to be determined, or will remain a mystery for the time being. But the other thing that he goes into is, how convinced should the Mavericks be that, Porzingis is going to sign a long-term deal with them? Now, interestingly enough, Mark Cuban made it a point of emphasis during that press conference, and basically every time he's discussed Porzingis at length, in saying that his vision for the Dallas Mavericks is to keep Porzingis and Luka Doncic together for as long as possible. And he puts blame on himself for Steve Nash departing in 2004 when he signed with the Phoenix Suns. He says, quote, "It was my mistake to not keep Dirk and Steve together longer. I won't make the same mistake with Luka and KP." He also talked about, obviously, the question that any Knicks fan would have, that, could they have done better? Who won the trade? And he makes it pretty, flat out that there is no answer today as far as whether or not the Knicks, won the trade. I'm going to go into something else he talked about as far as, why didn't the Knicks shop the Dallas deal for something better? He goes, the Knicks were convinced, having devoted much of their January to assessing their various Porzingis options. So, again, you get the idea that these conversations have been taking place for quite some time, that no team out there was prepared to absorb the Hardaway and Lee contracts in addition to packaging a player of Dennis Smith's caliber with first-round draft picks. So, and obviously he points out that the Knicks now have more than $70 million in cap space. That's the argument that I've made as well when I've discussed this, with friends or whoever else, that, when people say that the Knicks could have gotten more, my question is, in terms of what? In terms of players or in terms of picks? Because obviously you couldn't have done more in terms of picks. I mean, the Mavericks just gave up 2 consecutive draft picks. Obviously, with NBA rules, you can't give consecutive year draft picks, but the Knicks have the Mavericks 2021 and 2023 draft pick. So, with that said, what more could you have gotten? I mean, as far as a player is concerned, you're not going to get a player that, look, a Dennis Smith Jr. type is kind of a uncommon scenario for a team making this kind of a trade, that you get a first-round pick from 2 years ago. That, for what it's worth, I don't want to say had a falling out, but maybe didn't see eye to eye with his head coach. And in terms of the fact that your best player now, Luka Doncic, is a much, much better version of Dennis Smith Jr. and is a more complete player at that same position. So obviously, not to say that that made Smith expendable, but it made him tradable. So the Knicks took advantage of that. Beyond that, you weren't really going to have a whole variety of players that the Knicks were going to be interested in taking on and keeping beyond this year. That was the other challenge as far as what you were going to get in a potential return. But look, in this trade, the Knicks got immense salary cap relief. They got future assets. You essentially cleaned the decks. Now, he does also, Mark Stein again, does reflect on how many executives around the league are sort of in agreement that the Knicks don't make this kind of a trade unless they have some level of intel, some idea of who may be coming in free agency. And I'll leave it at that. In conclusion, again, this KP Knicks back and forth drama, eventually it'll simmer down. Obviously, look, the NBA is such where you have your top level of players, your top tier of players, and when they talk, when they post something, whether it be direct or whether it be cryptic, it's news. It's going to make news. And when you have a blockbuster trade of the magnitude that we had last week, there are going to be ripples from there. There's going to be, follow-ups. They said this, the Knicks leaked that, Porzingis posted this. That's going to be the case. But eventually it's going to die down because now, the Knicks are going to be looking at the trade deadline, and all the talk is going to be about that. I mean, we're 2 days away from that. And Porzingis is, reportedly going to go to Spain and continue his rehab. But I guess the latest part of that story is that Porzingis is medically cleared to play, and Stefan Bondi did a good job pointing that out as well. But reportedly, Porzingis is now going to, rehab to get bigger and stronger so that he can guard against future injuries. And, again, that's the thing to keep an eye out for. If Porzingis comes back less than what we expected him to come back from this injury, that 2021 pick all of a sudden becomes that much more enticing because that's an unprotected pick. So let's just say, again, you don't hope that somebody comes back injured or is hurt or whatever, but if Porzingis is not his unicorn self and the Mavericks find themselves in the middle of the pack or out of that playoff picture, now all of a sudden that 2021 pick could be a lottery pick. So we'll keep an eye on this and see if there are any more back and forth between the Knicks and Kristaps Porzingis. Obviously, the big development is going to be in a couple of days. The trade deadline is, we'll see what the Knicks are able to do, whether they're able to trade any of their assets, whether, there are any takers for Wes Matthews, if they can salvage anything for Enes Kanter, or if past the trade deadline, the Knicks are going to have buyout after buyout. If you like what you heard, subscribe below, like this video. A lot more content to come here on Knick FM and knickfm.com.